Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today we have another incredible guest. Man, I'm super excited about this. I love learning from people in all different industries and learning how they got there, because that's really the whole goal, is to learn how you got to where you're going from a legacy perspective and why you're going where you're going. So Dave Menz, terms himself the Laundromat Millionaire. He's a veteran who grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, I think. I'm not mistaken there, right?
I grew up the first 10 years of my life in Flint, Michigan, and I've lived in Cincinnati since then. So,
okay,
yeah, Cincinnati's home.
I figure I grew up. It's so funny. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, he's there in Cincinnati, and he just wants to share his story of how he went from where he was to millionaire, and how you can do the same. So we're going to be talking a lot about that, and then he's going to share a little bit of his story in the laundromat business. I've considered laundromats before, so I'm interested to hear your take on why you chose those specifically to make your millions. So take it away, Dave. Let us know your story and why you are where you are and where you're going.
Sure. Well, first, Sam, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. So the quick version to my legacy, my journey, my story, is I grew up in pretty extreme poverty. As a little kid, was born into poverty. My parents lived in Flint, Michigan, which is where I grew up. And they were high school sweethearts. Had a kid in high school, and so my childhood was pretty much behind the 8 ball from a financial standpoint. And obviously, I grew up. My dad grinded, worked really hard, kind of dug us out of poverty, if you will. And we ended up, later in life, as I became a young adult, they were probably more lower middle class, maybe middle class, even at one point. Throughout my entire childhood, I always had this burning desire to own a business. I was the kid with a lemonade stand. I was the kid cutting grass, mowing lawns. And I think a part of it was just I was poor. So I just needed some money, like to buy candy or play baseball or whatever. We just didn't have any extras. And so I just kind of always grinded from a really young age, just to try to get the things that I saw a lot of other kids, in life, got from their parents. And I just got that entrepreneurial itch. I always tell the story that when I was at a kindergarten graduation, they go down the line and they ask all the kids what they want to be when they grow up. And this kid says Batman, and this one says I want to be a professional baseball player. And at 5 years old, I said I wanted to own my own business someday. And so that was. I always say I don't know if I was born with that or how that works exactly, but it's definitely something that's been ingrained in me from a very young age. The interesting thing is, I didn't do well in school, didn't attend college, or didn't graduate from college. I did go to community college for a year, barely graduated high school. I was terrible at school. I don't know if you describe it as a learning disability, but I definitely have a terrible memory for sure. I can't hardly memorize anything. And so I learned that I wasn't good at school. So going to college and going the traditional route wasn't an option for me. And so I had to find my way in life. And at 19 years old, I got an entry-level position at the local telephone company here in Cincinnati, which is where we eventually moved. And started at an entry-level position, grinded, worked really hard over a 17-year career, was promoted 5 times, built a nice middle-class lifestyle for my family. And I would say about 12 to 13 years into that journey, I just really got burned out on corporate America. There's a lot of great things about it. I learned a lot of great skills and lessons, but there's also a lot of negative things about it, especially if you're an entrepreneur at heart. And I just realized that I was trading my time for money. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be more than that to the world and make my mark on the world. And I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that wasn't in corporate America. And so me and my wife made a very deliberate decision to live well below our means. We had a young family at this point. Live well below our means, save quite a bit of money over the course of a few years for potentially someday buying or owning a business. And we didn't know what that would look like. We had no idea. I just knew I didn't want to do this until I was 50 or 60 years old and then retire. And so we just knew we had to prepare. And so we lived well below our means and kind of squirreled away our nest egg, if you will. And eventually one day found a local laundromat for sale a couple miles from my house, believe it or not. And I had been looking for businesses for sale for many, many years and definitely wasn't set on laundromats. But I knew whatever I purchased, I would need to stay at my full-time job for a short time while I built the business up into something that could support my family, because I had a pretty good job, pretty good benefits and things like that. And so it wasn't going to be easy to leave. And long story short, one laundromat turned into two and we made it profitable, and two turned into three, and three turned into four. And we built a local chain of laundromats here in Cincinnati under the brand Queen City Laundry. Cincinnati is known as kind of the Queen City. And so we built that brand from the beginning. That ended up turning into us launching a laundry pickup and delivery business, which is exactly what it sounds like it is, under the Happiness brand. And long story short, 8 or 9 years into that journey after buying our first laundromat, we lived well below our means for 5 or 6 years, even with the businesses, reinvesting everything the businesses made back into the businesses to grow them and scale them, and a lot of vertical integration and things like that, or some vertical integration. And after 8 or 9 years, we were preparing a personal financial statement one day, and I looked up and looked at my wife. I said, "Do you realize we're millionaires?" And she looked at me and she was like, "What?" And I said, we're millionaires. Like 9 years ago, we had a net worth of $50,000 when we bought our first rundown, dumpy laundromat in Amelia, Ohio. And 9 years later, through delayed gratification, continued reinvestment, I don't do anything halfway. It's my nature. And so just a lot of obsessive learning about the industry, digging deep into self-education, learning from great mentors and advisors, people that were doing great things in the laundromat industry. And we woke up one day as a millionaire. And how I got the nickname Laundromat Millionaire is I was on another podcast, and I was telling my story, and they were not a laundromat specific podcast, of course. And they referred to me as the Laundromat Millionaire, and it just stuck. And I thought, well, that sounds a little braggy, but I understand marketing and I understand it's a little sexy, if you will, and a little pervasive. And I just said, well, I can either run from this nickname that I've been given, or I can embrace it as kind of a badge of honor. And I knew at that point that I had a story to tell, and I wanted to someday write a book about my journey and things like that. And so I just decided to embrace the nickname Laundromat Millionaire, and it's just taken on a life of its own, to be honest with you, Sam.
I love it. So it's funny, you bring up some words. So when I speak on stage talking about legacy, one of the acronyms that I use is SMART goals, right? Or SMART legacy. And I rebranded what the words mean, right? Because you have SMART goals, which is a specific, measurable, attainable. I don't even know what they are. I don't like them. So I try not to think of them too much. But when you think of a SMART legacy, it needs to be sexy. So the S actually stands for sexy. It needs to be massive, so big that you can't accomplish it yourself. It needs to be audacious. You say pervasive, I say audacious, right? Mm-hmm. So it needs to be audacious. It has to be remarkable. Like, hey, what the heck? What's this about, right? So catchy. And then transparent is going out and sharing your message so that other people, one, know that they can accomplish it themselves if they followed you. But two, part of it is like actually stating your goals out publicly. A lot like Elon Musk is probably one of the better ones at this, saying, you know what? Hey, we're going to go colonize Mars. Like nobody on the planet thinks that that's actually going to happen, but they're just like, that guy is dreaming, mm-hmm. and I want to support his dreaming because I have lost my own dreaming. Okay. Well, part of this podcast is helping people get back in touch with their dreaming sense, say, what do I want to do? What do I want to become? And it's so easy, as you mentioned, to kind of get lulled into, I call it corporate slavery or corporate prostitution, because you just are going to the highest bidder. Like you really just like, if somebody's going to pay you a little bit more, you're going to keep going back and back and back and back rather than actually owning your own dreams. So I want to talk about this a little bit. Flint, Michigan, that is, I think, I don't know if it's worldwide, but it's definitely in America. That's pretty much synonymous with hell. I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong, and anybody who's there, you can correct me. I'm not saying it as like a negative thing. I've never personally been there, but I've met multiple people who've come from there, and they aren't too thrilled about the place. So, why? Like, were you just born there, and that's where your parents were, and so that's how it was, or have you thought about going back and trying to help that community? Like, do you have any affinity to the community, or is it just like, hey, I'm so glad I'm gone, not looking back?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because from doing other podcasts, I had someone reach out to me from Flint, Michigan, that are trying to build a community laundromat in a underserved area. And I offer laundromat coaching services for people that want to get in the industry and things like that. And I'm going to offer my services pro bono. So it is home to me from an original sense, but Cincinnati is definitely my home because I've lived here for 35 years. But I definitely have an affinity to it. I do still have some aunts and uncles, cousins, things like that live in Flint. What I'll tell you about Flint is it has one of the highest crime rates in the country. A lot of people don't realize, even higher than Detroit in some cases, depending on the category. It's definitely, it used to be a booming town from a industrial standpoint, all the General Motors factories there and things like that, which most of them have moved out. All the good jobs have basically left, and it's just not a great place to live anymore, but there's a lot of great people there, just like any community. But yeah, so that's kind of my way of giving back, but I do go back on occasion and see family and friends and things like that. I have, my sister is buried in Flint, who passed away from a brain tumor early, in life. And, so I definitely have an affinity for it, but Cincinnati is home for me and always will be. Sure. So I have no intentions of living there again. But it's a pretty sad place to live, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, it's just fascinating because from a completely different perspective as a business owner, I think oftentimes we underlook or overlook, I don't know, basically we just ignore the fact or are not conscious of how much a business owner can bring to a community when done properly and involving the community. Like these businesses that were there, they were the thriving aspect of the community. And for them to just pick up and leave and go somewhere else, it can destroy an entire community. And you just don't think about it because most businesses, and I'm not necessarily immune or not this way either, but you're just thinking about how do I make this thing the most profitable that it can be? And that's what you're thinking. You're the CEO of your business and you've got to be thinking that way. It's not like you're supposed to be thinking about how do I give charity when my shareholders are saying, hey, we need to increase this. It's your job to make the most fiscally responsible decisions, even if sometimes those fiscally responsible decisions don't have the most net positive effect on the surroundings at large. Your job is literally to make the most fiscally responsible, not the most socially responsible all the time, it's a hard balance. I'm not going to pretend that I'm good at it at all, but I think that's interesting. And then that you knew you wanted to be a business owner so young. At what point did you lose sight of, and I don't know if that's the right word, but just go with me on it. At what point did you lose sight of wanting to become a business owner and settle for a corporate, just an income?
If I'm honest, I sold out temporarily. Sure. I got an entry-level position at the local telephone company, which was not a great job, but they promote from within. They provide a lot of internal training, technical training, to be able to go outside and work on the phone lines. And, at the end of my career, I was one of the guys that climbs the telephone poles and fixes the phone lines. Very, very good paying and benefits union job. And so, I was making more money than most people that I knew in my early 20s, mid 20s. And it certainly wasn't a lot of money relative to where I am now, but it was just, it was what I considered to be probably the ceiling, financially speaking, of my earnings. And so I just, I always had it in the back of my mind that I still wanted to own my own business, but I never dreamed that I would at any point give up that corporate job. And what came out of that was I eventually got burned out, and the company started removing a lot of our benefits. and, eliminating 401ks and pensions and things like that. And I just had this aha moment one day in my probably late 20s. And I said, like, this isn't a career anymore. It's just a job. Like, I'm just trading my 8 hours a day for whatever they paid per hour. And that's it. Like, there is no, I saw it as a job and rather than a career. And once I realized what I had done, I knew that I still had this burning desire inside of me to own my own business someday. And I just looked at it and said, man, I'm pretty young. I mean, I'm in my late 20s and I have a pretty good foundation. So I knew I wouldn't just leave my job day one. But I knew that I could find a business, or I hoped I could find a business, build it up over time, find something in an industry that's a vital community resource, meaning it's needed. And that I could really, instead of just trading my time for money in a corporate setting, that I could really put myself in a position where I could serve the community and financially benefit from that simultaneously. Because both of those things were important to me. Going to work, earning a little bit of money, trading for my time just wasn't enough for me. In my early 20s, it was enough for me. But I think part of it's because I started my career so young and I had a pretty decent amount of success in a fairly short period of time that I just kind of became burned out. And I was like, there has to be more to life than this. And I immediately just went back to that mindset that I had as a child of, I still feel like this is what I was meant to do. Why did I ever let that thought leave my mind?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there that I'm going to try and touch on without getting too deep. But one is priorities change. And what your priority may be right now may not be the priority in 6 months or in a year from now. And that's okay. So that's number one, just understand that. Number two, and I think this is of bigger importance for me to point out on the show, is many people chase a secure job or a secure, I don't know, I guess a secure job. That's really the only thing I can say that it is, because I don't know that it's a secure income. And the problem is that when you're chasing this, you think that you're in a state of security, but the reality is you have no control, and they can start stripping away all of your security gradually, and you have no control over it. You've given into the idea that you need a job and that they need you, and all the stories that we tell ourselves. You're an essential part of the team, and you're making things work. And if they're good in their management, then they make sure you feel like the whole freaking business rises or falls on your efforts, right? That's a good, if you want the best out of your people, that's what you're going to do. Make sure they feel like they are the key that makes the whole thing run smoothly, and that you couldn't operate without them. And yet you're still able to pay them pennies and strip their benefits away. And it's just an unfortunate reality that often happens in corporate America. Now, I'm fully aware that's not everybody's experience, okay? And I'm not saying that everybody should be an entrepreneur, because fact is, all of us entrepreneurs, we need we need employees that are going to sit there and work for us. So not for us, I would say rather with us, to build a vision of what we could create. There's people who don't want the risk of being an entrepreneur, and I get that, so I don't feel accused by this, but I really do think that I would rather personally have a secure income, knowing that I can create income because I have the skills necessary to do so, rather than have a secure job that somebody gives me income based on a position that I fill in their wheel. And so being able to separate those two is, I think, a very important skill, mentally, emotionally, and then also being able to do that physically. Because you can have an entrepreneur, you could have your businesses, and you could still have a job if you wanted one. Like, there's nothing wrong with having all these businesses and still going to work for somebody if you like working for somebody else. You can do both.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you this too, Sam. I mean, there was a time in my life where I guess you would say I was a little bit naive and immature, that I thought anyone that didn't want to be an entrepreneur and a business owner was crazy. I mean, I thought they were like, I literally had no respect for anyone that didn't think being a business owner and entrepreneur was the way to life. And as I matured, as I grew, as I became more successful, I realized, you know what? We're a different breed. We really are. Our brains are wired differently, and we think differently, and risk doesn't scare us as much. Not that it doesn't scare us, but as much. We're not as driven by fear, and security is relative. As you mentioned, what's secure? Well, secure for me, security means I control my own destiny. I have financial freedom. Where a lot of people think, putting it in that guy's hands, that's security. And I never saw that as security. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic point. And I've done that journey. I've went through that emotional journey of eventually coming full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that you said earlier, and I'm all about calling people out on their identities that they give themselves, because I want to dig into it and find out, because I know that you're not the only person who believes this about yourself, number one, and you're definitely not the only person who believes it. Like, let's put it this way. Other people probably have that belief of you or of other people in their lives. So this belief that you said is that you have a bad memory, or you had a bad memory in school, and so that's why you sucked at school. And I don't know if that's true or not. In my experience, how long has it been since you learned how to talk?
A long time.
So your memory is okay with speaking. How about walking, running, going to the bathroom, breathing? I mean, like all of these things. I don't think it's that people have a bad memory. That this is my hypothesis, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's true, but I think that positive ways we can speak to ourselves is better. So
sure. I love to learn, so I want to hear this.
Yeah, you may not have a bad memory necessarily. You may just choose not to remember things that you deem irrelevant in your life.
Yeah.
And
I think that's very fair to say.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to be clear, because people are like, oh, I'm a bad student. Well, just because you don't succeed in some other guy's version of success.
Yes.
And to be clear, and this is Sam's opinion, and a lot of people that I know agree with me. So I at least we have this, what do they call that? Fishbowl thought here. But that is that in large degree, the school system's purpose was to create factory workers. It was to create people who you could plug into anything, and they could be essentially a human drone accomplishing somebody who is thinking their objective. So the fact that you suck at being able to do monotony well, right? That you suck at being able to be a pawn of somebody else's game, I don't see as a bad thing. Now, some people see it as, well, I have a bad memory. The problem is that they take this bad memory identity and then they carry it into other areas of their lives. I don't think and maybe I'm wrong, but maybe not, right? Did you forget your family members? Did you forget your wife and how much you love her? Like, do you forget these things in your life? The things that are important to you to remember, you remember. The things that aren't, most of the time aren't. And that goes for everybody. I'm curious to hear your feedback on that. Obviously, I'm not telling you what you remember. I don't know what you remember. Mm-hmm. But I know for me, I could say I have a bad memory, or I could say I have a very selective memory, and it's used for what I need it to be used for. And I've had this conversation with my wife. It's like, these are all the things that are going on in my mind that I'm keeping track of. And doing the dishes, or how many times a week I did the dishes, isn't on my list of things that I really think I need to remember. Okay? So you're going to have to help me out with that one, because I'm dealing with all this other stuff. And if you want to deal with all this other stuff, I'll make sure to remember these things that are other important. Okay? So like prioritizing your memory, I think, is important. So I'm curious where you come in on that, because I think that's an identity that not just you have, but a lot of people have. And I think it could benefit people if they could change it.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I appreciate you bringing that out. And that is something that I'm aware of. And so I probably do need to change the way I verbalize that. I agree. Because you definitely hit the nail on the head when it comes to school, which is how this started, right? Because with school, there were very few classes that I got good grades in, but there were also very few classes in what I call formal education, or the classroom setting, that I saw any value in real life, like from a young age. And I would always, the teachers, my parents, everybody would tell me how important all this stuff is. And I would look at it and go, I can see where that's important. Like, I'm not going to, I took a typing class in the 90s, I mean, just as the internet was kind of coming out, that was pretty valuable. And I didn't know the internet would be what it is today, but I do understand, they had talked about in school that the internet was coming and what it was going to be and how cool it was going to be and how useful of a skill typing would be. So that's just one example. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, I've always said, if it's important to me, I won't forget it. So I think selective memory is a very good way of putting it. One thing I will add to that is I do think someone have So I think a lot of people have we all have different gifts, strengths, and weaknesses, right? I married someone with an unbelievable memory. She hardly forgets anything. She was valedictorian in high school, college, and her graduate program. She's never had a B in her life because she has an amazing memory and she can remember everything, meaning the important things and the insignificant, unimportant things. You show it to her once and she just doesn't forget, even if it's not important to her. So we definitely all have different gifts, strengths, and weaknesses. I guess a better way of putting it is that's not one of my strengths. I appreciate you calling me out on that because I think that's a fair statement. I can't speak for other people. I could just speak for me.
Yeah, exactly. And same for me. I don't want to give you an identity that you have bad identities, but I think that's a belief, that's a statement that I've heard many people say, and people have tried to tell me, oh, well, you have a crappy memory. I'm like, well, maybe. I don't see myself as having a bad memory. I see myself as only remembering the things that I really believe are important to remember. And There's a lot of stuff that I just couldn't care less about. That being said, and here's another thing that I've learned about myself, that let's say we did have a conversation, my wife and I, and she thought it was important and I didn't think it was important. I've learned two skills. Okay. One, if she can recreate the conversation enough, my mind will go find it in some filing cabinet that's been disregarded, right? Because the fact is the neural pathways did happen. And so if we can go down the same walk in the forest, then I'll probably remember the conversation eventually. Okay. But it might take a longer lead time than others. The other thing that I've noticed about myself is that sometimes the things that are important to other people, they don't necessarily need to be important to you, and it's okay. But rather than being very egotistical and demanding that because I don't remember it, I'm right. Okay? Because this can compound the bad memory problem. I don't have to be right anymore. If my wife says that I said something, she's probably right. But I've learned this phrase. That's not how I feel right now. So right now, this is the new truth, Because it's like, I can't be... Not that I want to scapegoat a bunch of stuff, but I can't be held accountable for beliefs that I had 5 years ago. Like so much changes in my life. Even 2 weeks ago, so much changes in my life. I have a new experience and my belief changes. So even if I did say something in the past, if I no longer agree with what I said in the past, then whether I said it or not doesn't matter to me because it's irrelevant in my mind. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I say I reserve the right to change my mind.
Yeah, exactly. But being aware of that you're not going to demand that you're right. I never would say that. You talk to some people and they're like, you said this 30 years ago or 10 years ago while you were raising us. I would never say such a thing. I'm like, okay, like you can't say you would never do something that happened 10 years ago that happened. We have it on video. I would never. I'm like, okay, come on. It's okay to recognize that who you are today probably would never. But who you were 10 years ago, 2 weeks ago, or 5 months ago, was a different person, and that person may have said whatever they said. Right. But as I am today and what my current thought process is, that's it. And sometimes my wife says, okay, well, you said this, or how do you feel about this? I'm like, I don't know. What's the question, right? And then I'll answer the question, how I feel today. And she's like, that's exactly what he said 10 years ago. I'm like, well, means I haven't changed my opinion on it. That's all. Right? I don't remember what I said, but if you ask me the question, you may get the same answer because I still feel that way. So just be conscious of that and graceful around the other people that not just for you, but for anybody listening. Be very careful about how you're labeling people, and however it is, I would do it in a manner that gives them power, selective memory. You remember what's important to you. If they believe that they remember what's important to them, and then you say, hey, it's really important that we remember this, they're more likely to remember it because you're putting in a file of important things to remember rather than, hey, you have a bad memory. Why even talk to you? So anyways, just I studied neuropsychology. And so that's where my mind just wants to pick apart these little things. Sure. That probably nobody else is interested in except for you. But I have some questions.
Most of the things you said, I've said to myself and even corrected myself. And I've even learned to look at my wife because she doesn't forget anything and just be like, if you remember it that way, I trust that it's true.
Yep, exactly.
I'm not patronizing. I genuinely trust that you remember better than me, whatever you're talking about. Or I'll say, I don't remember it that way.
Yep. But clearly we all know my memory sucks. So like, whatever.
Right. Yeah. No arguing that.
So here's a question for you though. Cause you mentioned something, you mentioned again, a phrase in passing, and I'm wondering how specific this phrase is, or is it just a nice phrase? So you said, you didn't want to leave your mark in the world in that corporate job. You wanted to go find something else to leave your mark on the world. So what I'm curious is, do you know now, or do you have at least a belief or something you're going towards as far as what mark you do want to leave on the world?
I mean, I think we all have, a million marks we want to leave on the world. I guess what I would say to that is I want to leave a much bigger mark than being a cog in a large corporate machine. That's really what I meant by that. And I'm not trying to discount, what I did at my job, because my wife reminds me constantly, you went to work that day and people had telephone service, and that's pretty important. So don't discount what you did that day. And that's fair. That's a fair statement. I guess what I would say to that is I've always been a very curious person. I've always been a very ambitious person, meaning I just want to be better tomorrow than I was today. And really what I'm saying when I'm trying to verbalize that is when I reached a certain pinnacle in my corporate career, I realized I couldn't be better, not as a human being, but in my career where you spend the majority of your time, right? Mm-hmm. And I wanted more than fixing this guy's phone line. I wanted to impact large groups of people, which is a part of the reason that I got into business for myself. I can create a small business and create jobs that are valuable to people. And I can, especially in the laundromat industry, that's a vital community resource. Sure. A local laundromat. A lot of people don't realize how important it is. We were deemed essential during COVID. No laundromat in the country closed. And there's a reason for that. Because hygiene is very important. And so I know that, yes, this is how I make a living. Yes, I provide jobs for people, et cetera, et cetera. But it's very important to me too that know that every ounce of energy I spend, whether it's an hour, a minute, or a day, is able to compound, I guess is the best way. Like I want to make a bigger impact. I always want to make a bigger impact tomorrow than I was today by being a better version of myself. I always call it elevating my ceiling. When I was a kid, I mean, my ceiling was relative to my environment. And when I overshot that ceiling and reached, upper middle class, maybe, then all of a sudden I realized that wasn't my ceiling after all. Like that was all in my head. My ceiling is way up here. And then when I shattered that ceiling, I realized that wasn't even my ceiling. And now I've realized I don't have a ceiling. What am I doing? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if I'm verbalizing it well, but the reality is I don't like to be put in a box. Like I'm 44 years old. I don't know if I'll be around tomorrow or not, but I'd like to think that I have a lot of years left here on earth, and I want to make an impact in a pretty dramatic way. And all I want to do is try to impact my community and the world, but more tomorrow than I have today. And it's a big part of why I do things like this and telling my story and trying to inspire others to chase their dreams and to not give up on their dreams like I did temporarily.
Yeah, no, I love that. So another thing that you mentioned is that, we're just going to enter a new conversation here because I think this is so crucial, because so many people, the reason they're not taking advantage of their life, right, and actually living their life from the reports, right? I talk to a lot of people, so I'm not saying that this is the reason it's for you, but when I talk to people and ask them, it really comes down to one of two things. Generally, they don't have the time or the resources, and you can ask them, okay, well, why don't you have the time, right? And then you can ask them, why don't you have the resources? And pretty much where that almost always leads is to money. There's very rarely that the answers to those questions, why don't you have those things, when you get back to it, it's very rare that it doesn't come down to I don't have the money. Okay? And the reason I say that is because if you're struggling with not having enough time, if you had enough money, you can buy time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
For certain things, right? You can't duplicate yourself so far as I'm aware, right? I can't duplicate myself, so I can still only be in one place, but you can buy time to literally do everything in your life that you do not specifically want to do. Now, there is at some point a limiting factor of time where you can't do everything that you want to do simply because you can only be in one place at a time. So I understand that there is a cap to this, but in large degree, it comes down to money. So one of the things you said is that you and your wife decided to prepare for your future, but you didn't really know what that future was. You're just like, hey, I just want a business. And so you started preparing for it. And so my question is, in that process of preparing, how did you determine how you were going to take those next phases, how much you needed to save, when you needed to save it by? Or is it just, you know what, we're going to keep putting money away and there's no deadline to this. We just hope sometime in the future.
Yeah, the answer was as much as possible. I mean, we weren't living in a cardboard box, so we had a lifestyle that we were willing to lower, but we had a young family. So, I mean, we weren't willing to live in our car, obviously. But when the money aspect, I understood from a very young age, once again, because I grew up in poverty, I understood that money is a very, very powerful tool, which you've just described really well. And so I understood that as well as anyone. And I knew that there were going to be situations of business opportunities that I would stumble upon that I didn't even know what they would, that were going to require some money. Now, yeah, you can borrow money, you can leverage, you can do all kinds of different things to get into business. But I was pretty confident that I would need at least some liquid cash. And so the answer was, how much can we save and how fast can we save it? And I would work overtime and things like that. But during that, I mean, it was about a 5-year process that I'm describing as saving up money. During that 5-year process, I never stopped looking for businesses for sale. I was always looking. But at one point, I only had $2,000. And, a year later, I only had $6,000. And I was looking at businesses that I could acquire for $6,000, that, $6,000 cash, that I could leverage, that would meet my criteria. It had to be something that I could run, quote unquote, on the side and still keep my full-time job. It had to be something that I felt was a vital community resource, meaning meeting a need in the community. I was looking for the laws of supply and demand to be tipped in my favor, meaning that if I took said business and elevated it and made it better and served the community better, that the community was being underserved. And so I see that as the laws of supply and demand. I always say the laws of supply and demand are undefeated. So you want to find a scenario in business where the needs in that community are not properly being served, because then if you go in there and meet those needs, you're going to be rewarded. Emotionally, you're going to be rewarded, which is important to me, knowing that I'm serving the community, but financially, I'm going to be rewarded as well. So the answer is I never stopped looking. I didn't have a goal. I didn't know it would take 5 years, but I was okay with it taking 10. Like when I decide to do something, get out of my way. Because time was irrelevant to me. It was how prepared I want to be as prepared as possible next week for whatever. And I'm not ever going to stop until I reach my goals.
Right. So with this question, just go a little deeper, I guess, into the mindset, because I also came from what I would consider poverty, right? And I think what I learned is not to compare people's poverty. Everybody has different definitions.
Absolutely.
Everybody has different circumstances. But I would say very similar. My dad ended up working for CenturyLink, and that he just worked in a call center. He just quit or retired. I don't know what he wants to call it, but first week in April, I think was his last week. Anyways, but as I went into being a business owner, and this is probably a level of like, Sam, you should work on this in yourself. And then there's the other side of me. It's easier to work on making more money than working on being okay, being poor, or living below my means. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Making money is really easy for me to do. However, trying to convince myself that like, well, you grew up poor, so obviously you can live poor. Let's put ourselves into living, like cutting back and living poor for 5 years so that we can be wealthy. Like I've never been okay with that. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be okay with that. I'm just curious, did you have to go through mental gymnastics, or because some people, they've experienced poverty, so they're like, yeah, I'll do this for another 5 years so I can get out of it. And then other people, probably more like myself, they're like, hey, I experienced that. No way in hell am I going back to that. I'm going to maintain my lifestyle and we'll find a way to make more money, but I'm not giving up what I've achieved. So how do you, I'm just curious what went on in your mind during that process. How'd you square that with your wife? Did your wife come from poverty as well? Or was it already at a lower standard of living?
Yeah, that's a great question. For us, maybe I didn't do a good job of explaining. For us, we were newly married. She was going to school to get her master's degree in teaching. So we were living, I had an entry level position. So we were living at a certain level that certainly was not poverty. I grew up in poverty as a child. We were very middle class. But as our careers accelerated and she got her master's degree and got a significant raise, and I got multiple promotions over the course of a year or two, which happened they were significant promotions. We just kept our lifestyle the same. So I don't know if that makes sense, but we didn't really go backwards. We just said, okay, we're not going to, as our earnings started to really take off in our late 20s, we just said, you know what, we're just going to keep our lifestyle the way it is, because we were extremely middle class and we were okay with that. We had already been living that way. We had a daughter, and I mean, we had a single family home. It was a modest home, but we had a home. We had cars that were reliable, but they were little $2,000-$3,000 cars that we paid cash for, but they were fine. You know, they weren't, I mean, all of our friends around us, as they got elevated degrees and promotions and stuff, they would buy new SUVs and buy a bigger house and put a pool in. And we just saw, one of the things that I've learned, because I've studied business, finance, and success my whole life pretty passionately. One of the things I've learned is one of the most powerful tools in the world is delayed gratification. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that, and I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but I just knew, okay, well, we're comfortable where we are. Neither one of us were really. My wife to this day, she says, I know you say we live below our means, but I don't feel like we sacrificed. And what I tell her is those are two different things. Mm-hmm. Like we never gave ourselves the rewards associated with our earnings increasing. We just saved it for that business. And it was a very conscious decision. We did the same thing when she was going through graduate school. We just said, hey, we can cash flow graduate school. Why borrow the money? Let's just live the same lifestyle we have right now for 2 years, get your master's degree, pay cash for it. And then we won't have to worry about student loans the rest of our life, because she had gotten scholarships for her undergrad stuff. So yeah, I don't know if I did a great job of explaining that, but we just really didn't elevate our lifestyle as our income increased. And that was our living below our means. We never sacrificed.
Awesome. No, I love it. And I appreciate the clarification. And I think that there's a lot of people on here that will listen to this and think, okay, that there's a contrast. Because I have had people on my show where they're like, hey, we decided to sell everything, live on the couch until we made it happen. I'm like, for me, I've done that. I'm not doing it anymore. Like I'm more where you're at. Hey, I'm not going to increase too much. For me, I do like an increase in lifestyle a little bit. So I switched to a percentage-based budget where, if I made $1,000 well, then my lifestyle gets to go up 10%. Not a lot. Right. It's a little benefit, but not a lot. So it is different, but I appreciate you sharing that. And then this is one other thing I want to talk about here. And then I want to talk about your podcast and your book and the things you're doing there. But sometimes when we start a new business or a new career, it's really tempting to just stick to one thing and being scared to branch out, scared to let our initial baby morph into a full-grown adult that has more skills, has more things. And sometimes it's important to let that baby, the initial baby, have babies. Okay.
Yes.
And this is business, right? You can call it children. Kids are the same way, though, right? They get to a point, they go through an ugly phase, they go through an unruly phase where you're just like, I don't even know if I want this thing anymore. Can we give it back, right? But eventually,
especially in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah. Eventually, they get to a point where like, man, I'm so grateful that I had this. This is really producing. And then they have grandkids. And from a business perspective, when you have a grandkid, when you have a business that creates more business, or the natural outgrowth of the main business is to have a side, open another service that's separated. It's okay to let that happen and to allow that to be a natural part of the growth. A lot of businesses in 2020, they failed because they were unwilling to adapt. They were unwilling to allow that natural growth to happen. And so then they failed, especially a lot of mom and pop stores. They just said, you know what, we've been doing it the same way for forever. Now it's time to shut down because COVID stopped us and I don't think we're going to make it, rather than making small adaptations and growing. So talk about your transition and where it's blossoming into the home delivery services and the coaching and the podcasting. Talk about how that just naturally grew rather than like, oh, I got to do everything all at once. You don't have to do it all at once. Just how did that naturally grow for you?
I think it's a combination of a few things. One, I've always read. Once again, I'm a big avid reader. I've always read about business and finance and things like that. That if you're not growing, you're shrinking. There is no status quo. And I do believe that. So I'm always trying to, once again, be better tomorrow than I was yesterday. And I think that's a part of it. I also think a part of it is that I'm just a naturally ambitious person, meaning that, as I mentioned a minute ago, as I shatter a ceiling, I realized that wasn't my ceiling at all. It was this fictional thing that I made up in my own mind. As I've accomplished more in life, I realize that I'm capable of more in life. And then I think the last thing to that I would say is I've never been afraid to pivot. Like, I've never been scared. It's not that I don't have fear. I mean, we all have fear. It's just some of it some of us let it paralyze us. Some of us let it scare us and control us. And some of us choose to ignore it. And it's not that it's not there. It's that I have to constantly be suppressing that fear and saying, nope, you do not get a say in this. And so I think it's a combination of those things for me that I just naturally was always looking for how to do anything better. I do it in my personal life. I do it as the type of husband I am. I want to be a better husband tomorrow than I was yesterday. I want to be a better dad tomorrow than I was yesterday. And I want to be a better business owner tomorrow than I was yesterday, but I also want my businesses to be better. I want our operations to be better, our training to be better, the way we serve our community to be better. Our competitive analysis. I want us to have a higher value proposition in the market than we had last month. It's just, I always say I'm happy with my life, but I'll never be content. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, I don't know if that's a natural thing. I mean, I think it's a little bit of probably who I am in my DNA, but I think a big part of it is that I'm just really driven. And for whatever reason, right now at the mid 40s, the age I'm at right now, this middle age thing, I'm realizing that all these things that I thought would keep me from achieving things that other people could achieve are all hogwash. It's all garbage. And I'm realizing that I'm capable, and my organization is capable of way more than I ever gave myself credit for or them credit for. And I'm starting to realize we're just getting started. And that's exciting to me because I am an ambitious person. So yeah, I mean, with the business aspect from a practical perspective, we acquired a laundromat that was a rundown dump. It was a complete cesspool. And I knew it when I bought it. It was losing money. And I just said, hey, if I can get this thing I saw it as a side business at the time. I said, if I can get this thing to break even, I'll be happy, because I had borrowed some money and I figured if nothing else, I'll pay off the note and eventually the note will be gone and I'll have this nice little side income. And as I dug deep and learned the industry and became very obsessive about the industry, I just realized that there was way more opportunity here. I estimate roughly 75% of laundromats in the country are just run down and in terrible disarray. They're a community cesspool versus a community resource, which is what they should be. And so a big part of me taking this journey and learning that, okay, our industry has a negative connotation associated with it. It's well-deserved, but we can do something about it. And I can be a part of that. I just wanted to do that with my stores. And so as I turned around one store from losing money to breaking even to making money to making decent money pretty quickly, with a lot of sweat equity and a little bit of cash, then I just became I became even more ambitious. And I just said, I want to do this again. I want to keep growing this one, keep making it better, but I'm not limiting myself to one. I want to find other locations because I realized that there's just so much opportunity. I always tell people, run down dumpy laundromats in great locations, you won't find a better business opportunity. It's just the laws of supply and demand are tilted in our favor. And so one turned into two turned into three. And I eventually, as I dug into the industry, I started to learn other revenue streams and aspects of the industry. One of them is called a drop-off laundry service. A lot of laundromats are what people call unattended, meaning that people come in, pay to use the machines, but there's not really an employee there most of the time. People might stop in and clean for a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the evening, but for the most part, the business model is kind of self-serve, if you will. You're just paying to rent the machines. You do your laundry and you leave. Another side to the industry, another business model, a more sophisticated model, is having attendants on duty that are there providing customer service, helping people with machines, helping them carry their laundry, hold the door, and keeping the store immaculately clean all of the time. Once you reach that point, which I realized I wanted to do, once you start investing in that payroll and that infrastructure, then you realize, okay, well, what else? You start looking at it and saying, what other revenue streams can I build from this? and a drop-off laundry service where people drop off their laundry to your employee and you professionally wash, dry, fold, and package it for them. And then they come and pick it up the next day. They will pay a premium for that service. And so I learned that side of the business and learned it pretty well. And we rolled that out to one store and then two and then three. And I started to bring on managers and trainers and started to kind of grow a team around me. I just realized I wanted to keep doing this. We acquired store number 4, which had a lot of excess space, a lot of excess capacity, if you will. And I looked at it and I said, man, I'm renting all this space, but this business really doesn't do a lot of revenue. And so I started looking at new revenue streams, even above and beyond like drop-off laundry services. And that's when I kind of looked into what they call pickup and delivery laundry service, which is exactly what it sounds like. We come to your home, we pick up your family's laundry, we take it back, we professionally wash, dry, fold, and package it, and then we return it to you the next day. And it's a very professional service. And there was a few people in the industry that, along with me and my team, were kind of trailblazers, if you will, for not just launching this type of service, but really learning how to scale it. And this was about 4.5, 5 years ago. So if you just think of society's mindset, what I call the Amazon economy, having a great idea is a great thing, but having a great idea with great timing is way better. And I just kind of hit the right thing at the right time, and I wasn't scared. But the reality is that it's a different business. Like, it's not the same as vending or having games in your store or even a drop-off laundry service, which is more of an ancillary income. We've scaled this we're approaching $1 million revenue from 3 trucks. And we didn't have to buy more laundromats. We didn't have to go buy more equipment, which is commercial laundry equipment's very expensive. We just had to buy a few vans. We ended up licensing a software suite that kind of helps us manage the business, communicate with customers. It has an app and things like that. And we were just able to build a scalable model. So we invested, some people say lost, but we invested a couple $100,000 in the first 2 years, trying to market the business properly, trying to capture market share, trying to build processes and procedures to make us fully scalable. Because I didn't want to do it on a small level. And it took a couple years. It was brutal. It was a rough couple years, but our team eventually, what I call, cracked the code. And we kind of came out the other side, and we had this, nothing's perfect, but a pretty well-oiled machine as far as a business model. And the beauty of it was I could take already successful business model in a self-serve laundromat and take another business model and lay it on top of it, leveraging the current infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, both of them become ridiculously profitable. And so now I tell people I have this good, better, best business model, meaning the good business model, meaning self-serve, you use my machines and pay me for that. The better being the drop-off laundry service, and the best being a high-end to your front door service with next day returns through Happy Nest. And I know, we don't have a ton of time, but I actually took it even a step further, and I actually ended up partnering. We created a national company with the Happy Nest brand, and I partnered with the technology company that I licensed the software from. And I basically took my business model, their marketing expertise, and their technology suite, and we partnered together. And we now partner with laundromat owners all over the country. Happy Nest is in 23 states. And it's a revenue sharing partnership where we essentially fly them into Cincinnati. They spend a couple days with my team. We teach them the business model. We teach them how to scale, and I mentor and coach and guide them along the way as they're scaling, as they're growing their business. And we found that, laundromat operators across the country that are trying to do pickup and delivery on their own, meaning independent, just kind of winging it like I did, they have about a 90% failure rate as far as scalability. But with the Happy Nest model, we're looking at more like a 90 to 95% success rate. And so it's another one of those things that it's good for the goose, but it's good for the gander, because it's great for our industry. It's great for other laundromat owners. We lay the business model out there for them, and they just have to execute, and they have 24/7 access to me, a mentor and a coach that's been doing this for 5 years and has been through the school of hard knocks and can tell them, hey, watch out for this brick wall, watch out for that. You got the right idea here. Don't do that. And so it's a pretty beautiful thing. And basically what happened is when me and my partner started doing the Happy Nest thing, I realized that I really have what I call the heart of a teacher. I enjoy helping people. I'm not going to be in a classroom, but I enjoy teaching people. Us business people, we like to talk about things we know and are good at. And I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of helping others build a business model that will go and serve their community. And I realized that I really love that. And so that kind of turned into sort of an independent coaching business, which is where the Laundromat Millionaire came in. And so I've written the book, Laundromat Millionaire. I've started a podcast to try to help and inspire small business owners all over the country, whether you're in the laundromat industry or not. I'm in the process of building out a coaching platform that will have like online courses and things like that, so that people don't have to pay me one-on-one to just be on the phone or on Zoom with them. They can just purchase these courses and they'll, hit specific categories about how to scale the business, how to launch the business, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really not even so much about making money for me as it is just about I'm one guy and I realize I can only be on a call with one person at one time, or even group coaching. I can only talk to one person. I can have 100 on the call, but I can only talk to one at a time, answer one question, so on and so forth. And so, my YouTube channel, which I have, my book, the courses that I'm in the process of building, the podcast is all really just about leveraging me to serve and help more people in the business community, specifically in the laundromat industry. So I don't know if that was a little too long-winded for you, but there's a lot there.
I think it's so cool. And I'm going to have a conversation. I think we can work together on some other things outside of this. But if you guys are able to, your book is in pre-launch, right? It's
correct. It will be
not quite published.
Correct. It will be out in late fall 2021. And they can go to my website, laundromatmillionaire.com, click on the book tab, and they can put in a request. It's not a pre-sale, but they can put a request in. We'll take their information, and then when the book launches, we'll send them a notification. Awesome.
I love that. So go check that out. Also, if you're obviously into podcasts, if you're listening to this, so go listen to the Laundromat Millionaire Business Podcast. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to do a legacy on rapid fire. 5 questions, 1-word answers, or 1-word to 1-sentence answers. You ready to go?
Sure.
Awesome. So what do you think is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
I would say time.
Okay. What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
In business?
Life. Or business. It doesn't matter.
In life, losing a child.
That would be hard.
I don't know if that's an accomplishment, but it's something I've overcome.
Yeah.
Overcome.
What is the hardest thing that, not the hardest thing, what's your greatest success to this point in your life?
Personally, my family.
Cool.
Business wise, absolutely all the things I just discussed, I've done in the last 10 years.
That's incredible. And what are 1 or 2 books that you would recommend to the Fuel Your Legacy audience?
One of them is definitely Good to Great by Jim Collins. Very popular book. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it. If you're interested in the laundromat industry, obviously get my book when it comes out. But there's another fantastic book called Today's Laundromat, which is put out by the Coin Laundry Association, which is our trade association in the coin laundry business. And that's a fantastic book that I found early on in my journey. You can get that from their website, coinlaundry.org. And if you are in the laundromat industry, that is, when I talk to coaching clients, it's the first thing I tell them to do is go buy that book. Even though it's not my book, I don't have an affiliate link. I don't get anything for it, but it is rock solid.
Awesome. So what is one habit, mindset, or behavior that you believe contributes most to your success?
I would say it's this shirt. I don't know if you can see this. I know a lot of people are on podcasts. This shirt says "Beat Yesterday," and that is me to the core. I don't put myself against anyone else's standards. I just want to be better tomorrow than I was today. Better version of myself.
Love it. So this is the final question. We're going to pretend that you've died and you've left your family and 6 generations from now. So this is your great-great-great-great-grandchildren. They're sitting around the kitchen table discussing your life, the impact you had, and the legacy you left. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
What I hope they will say is that I was a very loving and loyal person. I was a man of God. My faith is important to me.
Love that. Awesome. Well, I'm excited for you to go build it, and I love that you are giving back and looking for ways to serve and bless the people around you, because that's what I found. The most successful people I know, they now receive their most fulfillment from giving back, and almost all of them are deeply spiritual individuals as well. So I love that that's part of your story as well. So thank you so much, Dave, for coming on the podcast, and we'll talk to you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.